The last 18 hours have been very eventful politically. Not in terms of political developments, but in terms of political revelations. NRM General Miguna Miguna in Washington, D.C., for the first time revealed a lot of background information and a lot of behind-the-scenes happenings related to his wars. He's being deported from his own mother country last year. Now, the truth is, a lot of people were disappointed about that particular interview. It did not meet the expectations because the expectations were extremely high. I think what many Kenyans were expecting were instructions from Miguna Miguna, telling Kenyans what to do next, telling Kenyans what they need to do, to start to remove the current political class from the equation and to get their country back. In other words, they expected a lot of revolution talk. But instead, Miguna Miguna spent the entire interview talking about himself and what befell him. And this is what put off a lot of Kenyans. Still, in my view, he made a lot of revelations that for a political analyst like me were eye-openers. They explained a lot of things that have happened in the past, a lot of mysteries that I had not been able to solve until last night. And indeed things which Kenyans should be aware of going forward. The other very eventful interview was the bullfighters interview on Tony Gashoka's Point Blank on KTN. I'm of course talking about controversial politician Bonny Khalwale, former Ikolomani legislator, and the senator of Kakamega up until the 2017 elections. Bonny Khalwale's recent political moves have left many people baffled, mystified, and indeed it has left many Kenyans disappointed. Now, mine is always to encourage all of you, all my subscribers and even the visitors, to try and find the time to take in as many of these political interviews as possible. Why? Because we on this channel, listen to what politicians say on these shows, but there's something much more important we look at, their body language. And you really don't have to be an expert in body language. Your instincts can tell you, even your eyes will tell you. The way this guy is blinking, that's not quite right. Or the way they're shifting in their chairs, that's not quite right. The pose of Bonny Khalwale in this particular interview is very different from the poses he has had on several other occasions when he has appeared on air. When you put that together with the words they're speaking, things become a lot clearer. And in Bonny Khalwale's case, this is precisely what happened. Bottom line, a very eventful evening for Kenyans in terms of revelations, political revelations. So, on this show, what do we start with? Do we start with Miguna Miguna in Washington? That was quite sizzling. Or do we go to Bonny Khalwale's very fascinating interview? Well, I opt to start with a bullfighter. Now, the first thing you should know is that one thing about Bonny Khalwale, and one reason why I hate to miss any of his interviews, is because Khalwale has got one weakness. He usually ends up saying too much. What do I mean? As a politician, you have to be guarded. There's some information which is not ripe to be released. There's some information that will give your political opponents an advantage. On that one you put brakes. But Bonny Khalwale's brakes, following his long history in politics, are often faulty. They're not good brakes. So he ends up giving away too much. And yesterday, on Point Blank show on KTN, was no exception. So let us move very quickly to the explosive revelations that came out of this Khalwale interview. Number one, The DP Ruto camp is preparing itself for a presidential election, with the main opponent being Raila Odinga. Now, for most casual observers of Kenyan politics, this may not appear to be big news. But it is, and I'll tell you why. To use the words of one guy from Dubai, linked to the gold manenos, Raila Odinga's candidature in the 2022 elections will be disastrous. And by the way, Raila Odinga himself is very much aware of this. There's plenty of evidence to suggest that he's aware. And he's trying to play a game that will enable him to be able to maneuver his way around the numerous landmines that stand in his way to be able to be a candidate in 2022. It's very tricky. It is trickier than it has ever been for Raila to vie for the presidency again in 2022. And we saw glimpses of that problem in 2017, when NASA could not decide on who was going to be the presidential flag bearer. Indeed, if we are to believe the late Francis Nyenze, up to the 11th hour, that flag bearer was Kalonzo Musyoka. And according to an exclusive report on this channel, the reason why at the last 11th hour minute things changed is because of one thing and one thing alone: finances. The big financiers of that presidential campaign, the NASA flag bearers presidential campaign, were not willing to finance a presidential campaign that would not include Raila Odinga as that candidate. And so, Kalonzo Musyoka was offered the opportunity to raise the finances, to look for alternative financing, and then he becomes the flag bearer of NASA, which of course he could not do. Now, going by the way Raila Odinga plays his politics, and indeed the way Kenyan politics is wired right now, to be a serious presidential contender, you need to get together an alliance of various tribal chiefs. Now, despite the fact that 2022 is very far off, it is already very clear that it is extremely unlikely that Kalonzo Musyoka will again be in an alliance where Raila Odinga is vying for the presidency. Because Kalonzo Musyoka wants to vie directly for the presidency. According to his supporters, lazima Raila alipe deni. Because Kalonzo has supported him twice before. And Raila has been unsuccessful. Now, that using that word unsuccessful in this context related to Raila is rather tricky. Because last night, Miguna Miguna told us that Raila Odinga won the 2017 presidential elections. Now, hate him or like him, Miguna has got a record of getting his facts right. And Miguna's challenge to anybody who may doubt that Raila won the 2017 presidential elections is very difficult to counter. Miguna simply said this: whoever says Raila did not win, then let them open the servers and use the servers, audited by a very independent person to prove that Raila actually lost, because Miguna insists he won. Anyway, Kalonzo Musyoka will be out of that equation. The Mulembe Nation, in all likelihood, will be out of that equation. And for all intents and purposes, with or without the support of Uhuru Kenyatta, Central Province cannot be guaranteed. In fact, if I can just quote Hezron, he summarizes it as follows. He says, this time Raila Odinga will vie for the presidency and there'll be no rigging. That's a prediction of Hezron. But he's going to end up losing. Mimi nahurumia Raila. Saa ile hakuna rigging, Raila atashindwa. Saa ile kuna rigging, kila wakati Raila anashinda. Raila ameshinda more presidential elections than any African in history. Yes, that's Hezron's analysis. But having said that, anybody who writes off Raila Odinga in any presidential contest is making a mistake. Because the latest I'm hearing, from some sources, which seems to have been confirmed by a very interesting comment on this channel, is that Raila Odinga is going to have a running mate that will finish this presidential election before it has even started. It will finish it in favor of him. In other words, he will win even before he's on the ballot. And that is the presidential team of Raila Odinga for president and Johnson Sakaja as his deputy. What? Anyway, my apologies for getting carried away. We're talking about Khalwale's interview. Now, Khalwale said this: the two people he looks to really know what Raila Odinga is thinking are his brother, his older brother, Oburu Odinga, and a man called James Agri Orengo. Now, both these two gentlemen have said very clearly that Raila is running. And therefore, according to Khalwale, Raila is running. And therefore, the DP Ruto camp is preparing strategies and plans and game plans with Raila Odinga being the main opponent they're expecting. Number two, in terms of the next shocking revelation that came out of the Khalwale interview, is the fact that Bonny Khalwale is leading an assault, an attack to completely change the political game in terms of presidential votes coming out of Western Kenya, the Mulembe Nation. That game plan will completely ignore, bypass heavyweights from the Mulembe Nation in the past in terms of where the presidential votes go. And that means bypassing Musalia Mudavadi. That means completely ignoring Moses Wetangula. That means making the views of one Francis Atwoli completely irrelevant in the Mulembe Nation. The end game is to see the Mulembe Nation for the first time vote as a bloc for one presidential candidate, in this case William Samoei Ruto. It should not be lost on political observers that in the games that went on in 2017 concerning the presidential elections and indeed even the parliamentary and other elective seats, the most damage was done in the Mulembe Nation, where people on the ground were firmly behind ODM and Raila Odinga. But then when you look at the people who ended up being elected, most of them are Jubilee. Clearly, most of them were vifaranga via computer, which means that the people campaigned, the people voted, but the computer decided. Now, I can tell you one thing for free. It is highly unlikely, in fact virtually impossible, that the DP Ruto camp will have any capacity to play computer games in 2022. Let me just leave it at that. To sum it all up, it was clear that Bonny Khalwale was very uncomfortable during most of the interview. Last night, this was definitely not the comfortable Khalwale we're used to. He was definitely operating in very unfamiliar territory. Let me just leave it at that. And let's now move to the Miguna Miguna interview. Now, one thing that is very clear is that Miguna Miguna has a weakness that is diluting and greatly hindering his chances of making an impact in Kenyan politics. And this is a simple fact that we must now move on. Move on from what? Move on from the great injustice, the great suffering he went through last year when he was deported from his own motherland. Twice. Now, what happened to Miguna Miguna is terrible. It is mind-boggling. But he has to move on now, especially when he's given a chance to address Kenyans directly on a TV show, such as the Citizen show last night with Jeff Koinange. When Nelson Mandela came out of prison after 27 long years, he did not dwell on his suffering at Robben Island. Instead, he firmly stuck to his agenda for South Africa. He was keenly aware of the fact that you can't change the past. And therefore, you need to spend most of your energy on the future and shaping the future. Because yes, the past was terrible, the past was horrible, the past was a nightmare. But there's nothing you can do or say that can change that. Not even financial compensation would have given Mandela back his lifetime, his years wasted at Robben Island. With all due respect, because I greatly respect Miguna Miguna, he should now move on. He must move on for the sake of Kenya. Now, for the first time, Miguna revealed that there are actually 4 attempts to swear in Raila Odinga last year. 2 did not materialize, but 2 actually happened. He was actually sworn in twice. Once at his residence in Karen, and then the second time we all saw at Uhuru Park. But the big bombshell was the handshake was actually arranged, already in place, and already waiting to take place by the time Raila was sworn in on January 30th, 2018, which neatly explains why the carefully well-laid plans were not followed through after Raila swearing in. Mind-boggling, yes, but then this is politics. In politics, anything can happen. And indeed, crazy things happened. Now, Miguna's revelations also bring out something very interesting. That the swearing-in plans, contrary to what many Kenyans thought, were very carefully thought out, and planned by some very smart people. And indeed, if the plans that were behind the swearing-in had been followed through, chances are very high that Raila Odinga would have taken power. For instance, the videoed swearing-in at his house was designed to come in as a backup plan in case the actual swearing-in was blocked. Because what would happen is that the ODM team, or the NASA team, would beam the swearing-in to Kenyans. If for some reason the second one was blocked. And the whole idea was for Raila to announce a cabinet after the swearing-in. Indeed, one of the options considered was carrying out the swearing-in in a foreign country, and then beaming it live to Kenyans and announcing the cabinet immediately after, and then campaigning to get international support against Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, you'll remember that time Uhuru Kenyatta had massive legitimacy problems. Therefore, the chances of such a plan working were in fact very high. That's the truth. But according to Miguna Miguna, Raila Odinga chickened out. Now, there's something else that really piqued my interest. For a long time now, I've been getting feelers and information that the relationship between the very close relationship between Raila Odinga and President John Pombe Magufuli of Tanzania has in recent times been very strained. They are no longer the bosom buddies they used to be, visiting each other in each other's homes. I mean, Magufuli even attended the funeral of Raila Odinga's son, Fidel. And although Raila also attended the funeral of Magufuli's sister, sometime last year, that relationship has been very strained. It's not business as usual. It's not the same as it was before. And that is why it was super interesting to me when Miguna revealed that at one point, Raila called the Tanzanian president. This is while they were making arrangements for the swearing in. Tanzania was being looked at as a possible place or country to swear in the people's president. At one point, Raila called Magufuli and then handed over the phone to James Orengo to explain to the Tanzanian president why his swearing in, Raila's swearing in, was necessary. Because Magufuli was clearly against it. Now, many of you may not know this, but Raila Odinga played a very key role in ensuring the success of Magufuli in winning the presidency in Tanzania. Raila played a very key role, including financing and organizing for various things. Let me just leave it at that. And therefore one would have expected John Pombe Magufuli to return the favor, to side with Raila when Raila had a major problem in his hand, a major crisis, which just reminds us of a major truism about this life. When you help people, don't expect them to return the favor. Indeed, many times, the true colors of people you have helped will come out very clearly when it's their turn to help you. Now, according to Miguna Miguna, he sees himself as a threat to both President Uhuru Kenyatta and His Excellency Raila Odinga. Because to date, he has not received his passport, contrary to multiple court orders. Now, it is sad that Miguna Miguna has still not received his passport. It is sad that the Kenyan government, even with Raila as a key partner, continues to ignore court orders. It is very sad that a son of Kenya, a native of Kenya, one of us, still is deported today. That is very sad. However, I do not agree with Miguna's thesis that is a threat to the president and Raila. I don't. And again, if it was one of his strategies, I would advise him to focus on positioning himself in the current situation in Kenya to bring about change. The problem is that too many Kenyans have looked up to Miguna and ended up disappointed. And even today, there are very many things Miguna said in the past which many Kenyans brushed off that have come to pass and therefore put him in a very good position. However, he still refuses, he still hesitates to step into his position in history. Instead, he has chosen to focus on himself and the troubles he has passed through, the suffering. And his approach is also not viable. To date, he has been unable to position himself as a viable alternative to what we have in Kenya, or even as a viable revolutionary. And this is why, in my view, Miguna has already missed too many opportunities to step in and make a difference in Kenya. I know many of his firm supporters, I know many NRM soldiers will not agree, but that is my view. And it is the reason why the handlers of the president and the handlers of Raila Odinga don't take him seriously. With all due respect to him, Miguna needs to ask himself why. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.